Apostles and deacons. Just a couple of things to note here. First of all, the Sanhedrin, it says, called in the full council, all 70 men, which is unusual because all they needed was about 23 to make a quorum. In fact, Jesus probably wasn't tried by the full council. They kind of railroaded him through. But at this point right here, these apostles were making such an impact upon the city that the full council was called in to solve this problem. See, the Sanhedrin was allowed by Rome. Matter of fact, it was encouraged by Rome. If a city could have a council that in turn could keep the peace, Rome had an incentive. If you keep the peace, we will lower your taxes. And if you could be as successful as Athens, they eliminated their taxes. So especially the Sadducees here were motivated to keep the peace. And these apostles, they didn't know about them. They were taking over the influence of the people, and they didn't really know if this would ruin what they had. In the midst of the trial, Peter says a little something that's different. He says, "You hung him on a tree." We have kind of overlooked that for years, but think about that. The Romans, when they had places of crucifixion, they would leave the up and down part of the cross in the ground. They would just leave it there. And the prisoner had to carry the crossbar. That was called the cross. They had to carry their crossbar to the location, and then it would be attached to the upright part. Well, oftentimes they would just take a tree, strip it down, cut it off, and they would use that, just leave it in the ground. And they would use that to put the crossbar. So, since the apostles saw the crucifixion, could this be an indication right here that actually Jesus was crucified on one of those where it was actually a tree that was still in the ground? We don't know. But let's get to the widows. The deacons were organized to take care of the widows. Of course, from reading the scripture, you can see that it was the problem that had arisen between the widows that were from Judah and the widows that were from other countries. The widows from Judah were being treated better. So they solved the problem by establishing deacons, most of them from other countries. But the issue of widows, in that day and age, a widow was in dire straits. You see, she couldn't inherit her husband's property. That went to the next of kin, which could be the oldest son. So if she had an older son that could take care of it, that was good. Other than that, her only hope was to marry the next of kin. And if that didn't happen, well, she was ready for some hard times. Matter of fact, many of the widows turned to prostitution simply to earn enough money to live. The early church wouldn't let that happen. They started taking care of the widows, and we see it right here. You may think that's an extra burden that they were bearing, and it may have been, at least it caused this conflict. But in reality, it became a foundational strength of the church. You had the women of the church that knew that if their husband died, they would be widowed. And what would happen to them? Well, because the church was set up to take care of the widows, they would focus on making sure that they were qualified to be cared for. Consequently, they became godly women. And of course, their main job, older women, were to teach the younger women to love their husbands, to care for their children. So you have these older women teaching the younger women, who in turn would be teaching the children who would grow up to be the leaders of the church. It became the foundation of godliness in the church. A wonderful heritage that we have. Well, come back when we give you more insights on the story.